Yeah, hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. This is the TA only session, and Mirko and I are here to facilitate a conversation between the TA members. We also hope this will be start of a more regular dialogue between the TA members, because actually the TAs make up the majority of the IFSF, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail. Look, as we go through this session, we would encourage you to post your thoughts and opinions in the chat, and you can see at the bottom of the screen is the ability to click open chat and add your opinions, because we want to create more of a dialogue. So what we've done today is we've drawn together a panel of TA members, and we'll introduce the panel in a second, who are here to share their views. And then we'd like to open up the conversation to all members, again, to give your opinions, to post your questions, and to create a dialogue. And as I said, this is, we hope, Mirko and I hope this will be the beginning of an ongoing dialogue between TA members. Before we, next slide, please. So this obviously is part of the IFSF virtual conference. Before we get into the TA subject, I thought it'd be worth setting the context. Sorry, back to previous slide. I think one thing is clear, and this was clear from the presentation so far, that this sector is embarking on a period of rapid change. I think there are three dynamics that are worth focusing on, and they're in front of us. One is obviously the short-term impact of COVID. The second is how we're seeing behaviours changing, and I think Stephen's session on Tuesday and Peter's today touched on this very well. And obviously in the industry, we're seeing a longer-term impact of energy transition and moving to alternative energies and how that's affecting the business. So within this world, the question is, what's the role of the IFSF and how can it help its members navigate these changes? Next slide, please. And let's just recap on what is the IFSF. Well, IFSF has a global focus. Our members right now, we have 151, and you can see from the map on the screen, the geographies that they cover. There are actually, of those, 143 technical associate members. So the majority of the IFSF are the technical associates, which is us. There are 6 full members, which are the 6 oil companies. There is an associate member and an affiliate member. So, but when you look at that, we as the technical associates are the majority of the IFSF. And that seems to make sense because the output of the IFSF really is there to support us. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to hand over to Mirko just to talk a bit about some of those new members and introduce the panel.
Yes, thanks, Nick. Yeah, this was already introduced yesterday by Heather during the kickoff of the event the other day, actually day one of this conference. The community of IFSF technical attendees, technical associates is always growing, and we have some new members here, and some of them I know personally, so welcome them, welcome everybody. And we hope this community grows, continues to grow as it was in the past. So just to introduce the people who are with us today. In the next slide, please, don't do it. Yeah. So, well, of course, probably most of you know already Nick and myself. Nick is from P97. I'm from Ingenico, I should say Worldline now. And we have 4 guests. We have Ivan from Scheiden-Bachmann. We have Adrian from TLM, Christian from CODAP, and Grant from Tectonical. And the idea was to invite these guests today with us to share some of their experience with IFSF and some of the things they feel IFSF is contributing to their business with, and to how the work of IFSF is translating into their activity. So I think we can go to the next slide. And yeah, this is the result of a survey that we launched through the community of technical associates some months ago. That was just after myself and Nick took the position in the executive committee of IFSF. And of course, the goal from IFSF was to have a better feedback from the community of technical associates on what IFSF can do to improve the contribution that the forum is giving to the daily activities. And this survey was circulated to all the TA community, and the focus was to get some feedbacks on the main areas under which we should focus on what is the perceived value of the various standards that IFSF is promoting. Not big surprise to see that a lot of the standards that are used by the community is payment related, but also dispensers are very important, security, car wash, etc., etc. So we can move to the next one. And yeah, it's very clear to all the community, and we're not probably stressing this enough, but luckily this is clear to everybody, that IFSF is bringing a lot of tangible benefits to the industry in terms of standardization, interoperability, compatibility, scalability, future-proof design of products, roadmaps, also time to market, and obviously global reach, global footprint, and global representation. So the benefits are really countless, and the feedbacks from the community is that these benefits are well understood. So that's a firm point, and I think that's a very good start from the rest of the conversation we are having. Nick, do you want to add anything to this?
No, I think we can come back to this as part of the further discussion, but these were clear messages that were coming through in the survey. I think now we could, I think now would be a good time to jump to introduce the panel and then get into some of those discussions around these areas.
Yes, definitely. And yeah, so I think that the idea would be to just involve a panelist one after the other, and I will start maybe with Ivan. Can you hear me, Ivan? Is that okay?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. Okay, so maybe if you can just start with a short introduction of yourself, of your company, and what you are doing in terms of products, your main markets, and so on.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ivan Bublik. I'm CTO for Fuel Retail Solutions and Scheiten-Bachmann. So I'm since almost 1 year in the role at Scheiten-Bachmann, but in the business I'm already since almost 20 years and used to work for another company who did similar things like Scheiten-Bachmann does. So what our company is doing, mainly these are software and hardware products for the fuel retail solutions. So it's a site automation system, point of sale, back office system, head office system, card payment, forecourt control. And for sure, our relationship with IFSF is very close because we have implemented POS to FTC, POS to EPS, mobile payment to site, and so on, IFSF protocols. And our main markets are Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and a bit Benelux, but with less footprint. So our main footprint is in the DACH region. And I'm not directly involved with the IFSF standards as a CTO, but at least my teams are, because the product managers need to contribute and to discuss in the IFSF the way forward and how to evolve the standards and products, and then my development teams need to implement that. Yes, so this is a short intro from myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Adrian, are you connected?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Adrian Felton. I'm the CTO at TLM. TLM provide POS, back office, head office systems to forecourt and convenience retailers, predominantly in the UK. But last year TLM was acquired by the Medic Group, so that sees us going more into Europe and Africa and some of the markets where Medic are traditionally active. CTO role at TLM, what does that mean? I oversee the general technical direction of the business, and certainly standards is part of that. It's something I'm very passionate about, especially in these times where we have to move very, very quickly. Technology is moving quickly. So that's my introduction.
So I guess Christian is next. same question. If you can introduce yourself, your company, what you're doing with IFSF.
Thank you. My name is Christian Lester. I'm the CEO of CodeUp. Have previously also been the CTO of CodeUp and technical director in Gilbarco and DOMS. So working a long time, or not a long time, but some years in the business, 20 years. CodeUp does forecourt controllers, and therefore we are based on the IFSF FTC protocol and working with that. We also do OPTs, where we have our own small EPS server, and therefore also work very much with the host-to-host IFSF protocol since many years.
Okay, very good. And last but not least, I think it's Grant connected as well from Tectonical.
Thanks, Mirko. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Grant Sidwell. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tectonical. We're a high-growth fintech offering frictionless vehicle payment experiences. So for those of you who saw Stephen's keynote on Tuesday, so we offer the Big Brother experience with our own patent pending ANPR technology, except with the difference that we offer that up to 38 million drivers across 12 territories and multiple verticals. We're a new member to the IFSF. It's probably only been a matter of months, maybe 6 months. So we're really only at the beginning of our journey with the IFSF, and really getting to grips with the topic of today's conversation about what it can offer a business like ours.
Okay, thanks for the introduction. Maybe Nico, do you want to introduce the second question?
So yeah, I think what we're interested first off is to understand the benefits that the IFSF brings to members now, technical associates now. We'll get on to talk about the future in a bit more detail. So I'm interested from the panel members to understand what benefits does the IFSF provide to you? And if you had an example of a product or a project you work with that implemented IFSF standards, that would be interesting. So that's the starting point. So really, how do you use the IFSF today? I think we're going to go through along the panel. Imagine they were all sitting in front of us. So first off to you, Ivan, be interested in your views.
Yes, so we are intensively using IFSF because it's standardizing all the interfaces for us. So it's from the POS to FTC, from the FTC to the devices. It's from the mobile payment to the site. It's the EPS integration. So, and this really makes the life easier. So if we have to integrate third-party products and if they support IFSF protocols, usually it's a bit of configuration work, but it is much faster and a better time to market if you need to code everything proprietarily. So that's why I'm a very strong supporter of the standardization and IFSF in particular, because it makes life easier. And with my previous employer, I was working for Diebold-Nix, so it was exactly the same story. Whenever third party could provide IFSF protocols, the integration and time to market was by far faster than without it.
Have you used any of the protocols recently in a recent project?
Yes, at the moment we are integrating mobile payment with the IFSF 360, and that will be also one of my observations and discussion points later on during the question and answer session. And this is currently a very fresh development we are doing. It's our Signal Connect API platform, which is based on IFSF 360.
That's good. We'll come on to that. I'll be interested to hear what you say. Adrian, you've been at this game a long time from what I hear. I'm interested in how you, the benefits you've seen from the IFSF, and have they changed over time? So I'll be interested in your view.
I think the two main areas that that we get involved in, mainly around POS to EPS. That's the main one over the years. Not so much at TLM, but if I go back to previous roles at companies like Torex and Micros and Oracle, where the team I was working with were responsible for payment interfaces through a payment layer, through all the different myriad of POS systems that those companies had. To bring that to a single standard, as we've already heard, time to market, the fact that you're both already talking the same language, You don't have to walk people through. You've got the majority of your code developed. So you're normally it's just a case of mapping tweaks rather than starting everything from scratch is a massive benefit. And then sort of coming on to the more recent projects around mobile payment, to have that standard already in place, so you're not sort of going through and trying to work that from new, but again, you're already talking the same language, you're having a conversation around a standard. The time to market and the normal complexities you get are almost removed, not entirely removed, but it makes the whole process a lot easier and a lot faster.
Oh, thank you. A lot of compliance here. I'm interested in some controversy a bit later, but thank you for that. And I from my side, I completely recognise that mobile payment, the benefits of the standards. Christian, you, a bit like Adrian, you've been in this game quite a long time, so I'd be interested in your view.
It's very similar, but I can also add to this that going out to customer, it's also excellent having. You can put out that you have IFSF interfaces, because it gives you a common and easy language with your customers, knowing that you are ready for fast integration to third-party products. And that, I think, has been a very strong thing for a small company like Codeup, that we can get easier out to these customers. So that's also a strong point. And then, of course, all the common language when we speak to partners and other integrators, we don't start from scratch every time. We have a solid ground we are standing on and using, and get faster product to market.
Cool. So Grant, you come from a different situation as a new member in a slightly different sector. I'd be interested in your view about kind of what were the benefits that you saw for joining the IFSF, and how you're using the standards.
Yeah, and as you say, being able to effectively enter into an ecosystem where, and just to echo what Christian and Adrian were saying, around everyone speaking the same language, and it allows a business like ours to effectively plug into that ecosystem without necessarily having to learn. We can learn from everybody else's mistakes, and it allows us to. If anything, it allows us to benefit from the trust that the standard implies, and as long as we can comply to that, that really it means that the person on the other side of the table trusts that everything's up to scratch, which for despite us being a successful startup, we're a startup nonetheless, and so being able to lean on those standards certainly is very useful.
Thank you. I mean, that's where we are now. I mean, one of the things we wanted to understand from the survey was how looking forward and the future. Got 3 questions, and hey, you have a right to answer one or more if you feel appropriate. Thinking about the other standards, are there any standards that you don't yet use but you're planning to use? And what we're interested in here is, as you start to look at the broader scope of your work, and second, when you look to the future, the extent to which an API and standard API approach will help you in terms of projects, products, and your overall business. And if not, why not? Because I said at the beginning, we're interested in understanding not only where the IFSF is working for TAs, but where it may not be working. And any other recommendations or suggestions on how the IFSF should improve based on your experience. So I look forward and understand where you see the future. So very interested in your views. Thoughts, Ivan?
Okay, so at the moment there is no particular interface which we are not using today but plan in the nearest future, because the latest innovation was that we have implemented the 316, in particular the mobile payment to site interface. Is the API approach valuable? Yes, it is, because especially if we are talking about the on-prem solutions where we have to integrate 2 devices physically on-prem, then it might not be that important. But For the mobile payment, we have done a host solution where we have a Sigma Connect host, which is connecting the sites and doing then the mobile payments. And it's for sure it's a new cloud native microservice pattern application with APIs to the outer world, and then for sure the API approach makes much more sense. And regarding the recommendations and suggestions, I have one technical remark, and I don't have a recipe how to improve, but what my experience with IFSF throughout the last 20 years is that the IFSF spec, regardless what we take, if it's post to FTC, if it's post to EPS, whatsoever, it's quite comprehensive and complex, and it needs time for a person, if I'm recruiting a developer, for example, who is not familiar, to get into it. And after this burden is taken and the time invested, we found out, oops, but the room for interpretation, it's not precise enough. It's still possible to interpret in a different ways. And at the end, when integrating with a third-party vendor, there is always a certain effort required to make this configuration and integration in order to get the two systems working. And my suggestion would be, might it be easier not to try to cover everything in every possible scenario, but be more restrictive to make it thinner, but more restrictive with less room for interpretation? Is just a suggestion. And another observation is, when I look back at the forecourt devices, so it took several tens of years until the IFSF standard was set, and now every vendor who is doing dispensers, ATGs, whatsoever, by default provides this with the IFSF support on board. And if I look now into what is going on in the mobile payment and in the alternative energies, especially EV charging, I see that we run into the same problem again, that everyone is doing is proprietary as he likes to. There are, for example, we have now 4 customers where we have to integrate mobile payments, and only 1 is using IFSF, and 3 others are proprietary implementations, which we need to implement all 4. Same in the EV charging, and then it will take us again. So this will then end up in a zoo of different technologies and different integrations, and then it will take another 10 to 20 years to harmonize it and to bring it to one standardized platform. And my question is, what is the reason? Is it the reason that IFSF is a bit reactive and just not early enough recognizes the trends and comes up with new standards when already the train has departed and the others have started to do it on their own? Or is there any other reason, and IFSF could somehow influence this more in a way to push the standardization to make then at the end the life easier for the retailers, for the company who provides the mobile payment applications, for companies providing POS applications, just to have one set standard in order not to deviate and to distract and to redeveloping the same thing 4, 5, 6 times. Thank you. That would be my observations.
That was fantastic. Thanks, you, Ivan. And I recognize some of that. And I love the phrase zoo of technology. So I've written that down. Adrian, what do you reckon?
Well, I guess you know, from a view of what parts of the IFSF standard we use at the moment, you know, we can always use more, and we will use more. From our perspective, from TLM, you know, our entire POS system is based on a web API architecture. So we've had to develop that, you know, partly going on what Ivan said. We've had to move forward because we did this 3, 4, 5 years ago, and then slowly we'll readapt back to the IFSF standard, you know, when it's either convenient for us or when IFSF catches up, because it's, in my view, it's always going to be reactive. It's very difficult to be proactive, and I guess there's a fine balance. But then moving on to the APIs, and something I touched on earlier, and Christian and Grant both commented. I think Web API, when I talked about standards and talking the same language, you already know what you're talking about. I think the Web API takes that a little bit further. You know, whilst the standard's good and you understand it, if we go back to you know, to some of the old XML standards, I was still having to explain to people and talk to people what XML over dual channel meant, and walking them through that base of the that base of the standard and how that worked. But now as well as having that standard, I don't even have to have that conversation in the web API world, because it's more recognized and more widely used. And especially, with the sort of third-party applications that we're interfacing to now, a lot of them are cloud-based, all supporting web APIs. So we're just not having that conversation, which is, that jump is making our life even easier. And certainly from my customer base, where they don't sort of introduce two parties and say, here's some cash, go integrate. They're expecting you to work together if you want to offer them that product. So again, having that web API where we already have that conversation, having that standard where we're already talking, the speed to market and the overhead to me is a lot less. So it's far better for our products, far better for our customers as well.
I get it. Thank you. Christian?
Yeah, also thinking about the comment from Ivan regarding how we use the APIs, that I think our organization also needs to be better in not just using the APIs, but also looping back to the organization and getting improvements into the API. I think we're lacking on that part. And then, of course, also going into the electric EV charger area, we want to go more into that part. And I don't know how we see it connected to the other standards within EV charging, like the OCPP. Would also be interesting to know how we see that, if it conflicts or it can join effort, like we joined effort with Connexus. That was really great when we did that. And then lately we've been thinking about and also discussing with the customer about, is there anything related to IoT thinking that is also for IFSF? We are talking about that we're having the sensors and small devices on the forecourt, and the whole architecture around IoT, could that also be taken into IFSF, like an IoT forecourt gateway thing?
Yeah, it is interesting. Thank you. I don't have the answer to that. We'll come back to that. Grant, you're in that future focus space around parking and the link to fuel. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing here is that a lot of the ground's been covered by the other speakers, so I can kind of jump on the interesting bits there. So, in my view, the standards are always going to have to be reactionary. And as a business we sell ourselves on being at that bleeding edge of technology where, standards don't exist yet. But we obviously are very supportive if those standards do exist that we can then build upon. So all I would sort of say is that with regard to the IFSF is that whilst they will, inherently it will be reactionary, but keeping an eye on what is developing and then actively engaging in those stakeholders as they see new things emerging, so that at the very least we can look to try and standardize what we can as early as possible. That seems to make sense, because at the moment, if there aren't existing standards, then businesses like mine will just build our own and we'll worry about it later. So the nice way of putting it is we're very supportive of it, but the minute it doesn't work, we'll just crack on and do what's best for us.
Yeah, and that's the business imperative. So before I hand over to Mirko to pick up on the questions, just wanted to say to everybody listening in, watching, if you've got a question, please post it in the chat on the right hand side, or if you've got a comment and you want to turn the microphone on and make your point, please let us know. We're very keen to hear from all technical associates. So Mirko, do you want to pick up on the next question?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, again, we have been talking about the present and your experience with IFSF and what do you see as an immediate future, but we wanted also to have a perspective on how do you see the big coming mega trends of the technology, of the industry evolution and so on. So specifically, the question is, what are the trends and disruptions that you think IFSF should address? And yeah, again, we'll start with Ivan.
Okay, so as I already said, this should be the mobile payment and the EV charging, because this will be the fast booming market in the upcoming 5 years. And then what I would like also to pick up what Christian just said regarding the IoT devices and IFSF. And if I extend this further, for example, one of the use cases we are currently investigating is the electronic shelf labeling. And then we also see that there are different vendors with different standards, how these electronic shelf label devices are being contacted and so on. Maybe it's also worth to think, if I think about an IoT device, and IoT could be really everything, maybe something like electronic shelf label should also be part of this. And another dimension would be maybe Bluetooth 5.2, because with the Bluetooth 5.2, I could imagine in the forecourt a variety of use cases. For example, if you have this angle of arrival antennas that you identify where the vehicle did stop near the fueling point, so you can identify who it is, then maybe with the Bluetooth beacon identify the driver with his telephone, and when he goes in and wants, for example, to pay on a self-checkout, then he would automatically be recognized using that Bluetooth beacon who he is and what fueling is his fueling, that he doesn't pay fueling from someone else. And maybe that would be also worth somehow to standardize, because I see here also an opportunity for the fuel market in this Bluetooth technology.
Yeah, very good. And yeah, glad that you remind me that beacons, that was a very hot topic some time ago, and I'm happy to see that it's still considered in the technology trends. So yeah, next one is Adrian on the same subject. What do you see as a big trend of the wider retail industry, something that IFSF should be focusing?
Well, I think just echo what Ivan said around EV charging, especially sort of being part of a wider big group now where we can offer those products. But if I look more in store, so the sort of in store operations where we're seeing, especially through COVID, where people want sort of less touch points with either with the retailer or the customer, looking at self-checkout systems, home delivery, click and collect, scan and pay in store using the customer using their own device. We've seen a lot of interest, especially in the UK, with our customers looking to implement that. And currently, there's very few standards around that. Certainly, again, going back to the UK, the store and the sort of retail part of the store is becoming more important, with retailers looking, at different ways to get the jump on their customers. And going back to the comment with COVID, that's had a big impact, where a lot of our customers, although they're running fuel stations with fairly decent shops with a good offer, their customers are looking to buy and want the same services as the supermarket around click and collect and home delivery. So I think that's certainly something that should be looked at in the future, because I think that will become more important.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so Christian, what about you? What do you think in terms of future trends and large initiatives of the wider retail space, of the wider, let's say, technology improvements? What should IFSF consider as evolutions?
Adrian and Ivan already picked up on EV chargers, but I just want to add to that one. I think that's maybe one of the most important for our small company, that this is really picked up, also because I see charging as not just a fueling. There are so many differences that we need to look at into the specification. Maybe it's not just one interface, maybe it's many things. So I think we could do a lot on that part and be much stronger. So that's really a big focus area for us to going into the charging thing.
Good. Okay, so the last one, Grant, what's the view from your side?
Yeah, in terms of disruptors, I think that taking one step past COVID is that, because what we've seen as a consequence of COVID is that the ever-changing needs of the consumer those, the consumer's starting to expect experiences that certainly outstrip many people's ability to deliver upon those experiences. And so what we're seeing is that the winners and losers in these areas are those players who can deliver convenience at scale. If we talk about beacons and self-scan and QR codes and things like that, the challenge we'll always have is that whilst we'll just get bombarded with niche solutions for niche problems, but these are what the consumers are starting to expect. And if I think back to my time before Titanical to MasterCard, where you were looking at these new things that were coming through, but they were, it was kind of, they were shiny gadgets. They weren't necessarily making a huge impact on the market. But equally, you need to be reactive to what that consumer wants. So whether it's, an Uber Eats or, a Titanical or any other innovative tech company, there is always going to be that need to be reactive to the changing needs of the consumer and trying to find which horse to back when.
I think a lot of very good comments and insights on future activities and inspiration for what we should be looking next. There are some very interesting points that were made before in the previous comments from the panelists, and I maybe would like to spend with about what Ivan said at the beginning about the experience he had integrating so many different mobile payment interfaces, and the point he made on the industry or the technology maybe even going too fast for the industry to catch up with consistent solutions. And in many cases, I guess all of us are pulled into projects not based on standard, but just because time to market is of essence. And so we have these cases where we repeatedly invent the wheel again and over again. And so, yeah, that's definitely a difficult balance, because on one end, of course, it's difficult to anticipate the market trends and to put at the table enough consensus around a standard before technology really is mature or ready to take off. On the other hand, if you do nothing, then the technology goes ahead, and you find yourself following what others did. So yeah, that's I think a difficult point. Don't know, Nick, if you think about what do you think about that? But
yeah, I mean, I come back to the 5 points I think you touched on earlier that came from the survey. What benefits does the IFSF provide to members? And this is easier in an existing category rather than something around innovation, but the idea of standardization and that interoperability and compatibility driving speed to market. And I think it was Christian's point around, as a small company, you can look like a large and effective company because you can use the standard and you can move quickly. I think that was the heart of Christian's point. And there's obviously there is a kind of challenge in this, and that's the question of, and I think it was maybe in Ivan's point, I'm not sure, that it's kind of, that was we saying it's the lowest common denominator, yeah? So do you have the standard based on a limited number of requirements that everybody can use and then it gets standard around, or do you try and create a standard that has more flexibility? And the risk with the latter is then everybody has a flavor of it, and if you're in the integration game, which we're in, it is difficult. So but the more you tie it down from a TA's point of view, you could start to think about, it's constraining my competitive advantage. And my personal view is that the competitive advantage is not really around being able to create barriers to entry around the standard. It's about moving quickly, because this sector will move faster than it has, I believe. I'm picking up on, I think it was Adrian's point about Scan and Go. I mean, I noticed today that Marks and Spencer's Grocery have announced the national rollout of their user device Scan and Go. All the other retailers are trialing it. The grocery retailers, M&S have decided we're going to make it national. Now, that's an example of, and I think it was Grant's point, that trying to keep up with customer expectations that are changing is a challenge. So I think there is the balance between standardization and standard API approach can help drive that, but how do I do that in a way as a supplier that can give me advantage? And I think the advantage is so much around the speed to market and being able to use what the API connection creates for you to create competitive advantage. Yeah. So I agree with you, Mirko, and I also agree with a lot of time for the comments that the team was saying around this. This innovation is moving fast. But I look into other sectors that we're involved in, parking, EV charging, etc., which are playing catch up to some extent in terms of standards. You do look forward and go, I wish we could bring the learnings of the IFSF into those sectors as quickly as possible. So they don't look back in 10 years' time and go, wow, we've created such divergence, we're trying to bring it back together again. And so, Mirko, I probably share a lot of the opinions of the panel.
Sure. And also, maybe I would like to hear also from all the panelists on the point that was made by Adrian on the consumer expectations that has changed due to COVID. And obviously, we don't know, well, we hope it doesn't last for too long, but we may also consider that some of these changes are there to stay. So Adrian mentioned the self-checkout, the click and collect, and the store pickups and all these things. I think this is rather common around Europe. We have panelists from different countries here, but I guess the feedback is pretty much the same everywhere. Would you add anything, Ivan?
Okay, in terms of self-checkout, I think the current IFSF standards are covering this use case. So we have developed our Sigma Smooth self-checkout solution based on existing IFSF standards and did not need any adoptions, because basically it's the same backend as the POS, because what you do, you scan items, you select fueling points, and you pay them. It's just another UI and another user experience, and maybe slightly adoptions to the EPS process where you have a card with signature. It should not ask the end consumer that he validates his own signature, but in total, self-checkout is covered. And the other, like order and collect, that would be really interesting, because we already implemented with one of our customers the order and collect with Lieferando, and again, it needed to be a proprietary implementation because it was not standardized. And I think it's a fair point, because we already are in this integration game, and we have done again another proprietary implementation.
Yeah, very good. Okay, Christian, anything to add to this point on the different consumer behavior?
No, I think we are more on the forecourt side and the host to host. So we are not really out in the POS segment, except for that the importance of keeping the APIs alive also for the forecourt is essential for us. So if any new things comes up, it's important that we adapt to that quickly. So we are also agile in our APIs in IFSF. That's important.
Okay. Very good. And yeah, probably again, Grant, you have a different perspective, but I guess you are also touched by the change of consumer behavior to some extent.
Yeah, absolutely. And although as dark as it sounds, I mean, COVID's actually been fantastic for our business because it's accelerated the ask for contact-free experiences. So the ability for a consumer to drive up, fill up, and drive off. You don't have to download an app. You don't have to you don't have to touch anything. That certainly has accelerated our adoption. But then also the integration of other services like click and collect. We're dealing with some of the large UK grocers to facilitate that experience, both at their traditional sites, but then also on forecourts. And so it's just, COVID certainly has been it certainly has seen an acceleration for the demand, in the same way that we're conducting this conference virtually, and everybody's just considered that to be the new normal. we're seeing similar things happen in terms of what consumers are now saying, oh, it's perfectly normal for me to drive up to a grocery store and expect to have my groceries delivered to my car. Whereas 12 months ago, that would have been something quite unusual.
Okay, very good. So maybe just to complete what was the initial part of the conversation that we had around the feedback of the survey of technical associates. When we asked the question to the associates on what is also important for them in terms of emerging technologies, future need, etc., a couple of items came to the attention. That was referring to alternative payment methods also, and integrated with mobile payments discussion, wider mobile payment discussion, and also some feedbacks about alternative fuels. Do you have any insight to share about, for example, the integration of alternative payment methods in your products? I don't know if Ivan, you want to start again?
Yes, but I can't say anything specific. So as I mentioned already before, we have done now 4 projects for the mobile payment integration, and only one of them is following the IFSF 360 standard, and the other 3 are proprietary. Yes, same with EV charging. We are now in discussions, and we see the zoo of the different providers and the what they are using and how to harmonize this. So, but I can't tell about any specific project implementation, because many of them are still in a, let me say, POC pilot phase, and are not officially announced. The only one which was announced in the newspapers was the Lieferando integration with Shell.
Perfect. No, thanks.
Yes.
I appreciate it. No, actually, I mean, I'm also coming from a slightly different industry. So for us, for me, I'm sure also for Nick, when we speak about alternative payment methods, we are also considering the incredible solutions that are coming from Asia, like the WeChat Pay, the Alipay, and this stuff, which is extremely relevant for some retail areas. Not that much yet into the fueling space, because we don't that many liters sold to Chinese tourists, especially days. But yeah, this is probably again more kind of a
So at least I have lost Mirko.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I think he's frozen up. So no, he's back.
And now you are unfrozen. Mirko, you were frozen for the last 30 seconds.
Oh, sorry for that. So yeah, I just, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I was just saying that the feedback we got on the alternative payment methods was probably more related to WeChat Pay, Alipay, these products coming from Asia, which are not relevant to the fueling industry at this moment in Europe, because we don't move so many liters with the Chinese tourists or Asian tourists in general as of now. But maybe they could become solutions that can be adopted also in Europe by same players or different players. So in that case, they become relevant.
But to add to this, the 4 projects which I have mentioned were all European projects, and only one was following the IFSF.
Yeah,
so.
sure. That's understood. That's clear. Right. And Adrian, do you have anything to add on this?
No, not really. You know, there's a couple of projects we're working on, like everyone else. We can't really talk about. You know, in some of these leading projects, they don't have a standard yet, as we've talked about. You know, their standards are quite reactive. But I guess rather than comment on, you know, some of the alternative methods and payments of that, just coming back to, you know, where you are trying to get that competitive edge, or one of our customers is trying to get a competitive edge and do something new. The fact that we have a standard like IFSF, and this is just an example. And, you know, say we're introducing a new method of payment, whatever that is, and there's not a standard for that at the moment, at least you can refer back to a standard. So, you know, you can take the learnings of, you know, POS to EPS and all the other standards are in IFSF, and are trying to apply those rules and apply those thoughts when you're thinking about talking to you know, a new supplier, a new third party. So even though, you know, we've talked about standards being quite reactive, the bigger they grow, and certainly, you know, how big the IFSF and certainly Connexus are, when you do come to talk to someone new, maybe outside of the industry or complete new technology, you're still applying those rules, you're still applying those thoughts. So even then, I think standards help. Okay,
thank you. Nick, I think probably there is one question that we could share with the panelists altogether, which just came in from Ian Brown, and maybe you want to introduce.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing actually, Mirko. So Ian S. Brown's asked, you've talked about the fact that standards lag the market, and we often talk about vendors denoting their proprietary standards for the adoption by the IFSF to reduce this lag. I mean, Ian's question is this realistic? And actually, is it even desirable? If it is realistic, what can the IFSF do to encourage this? You know, it's kind of, I think Ian's putting the question back to us as technical associates, saying, yeah, I get your message. How can you help yourselves? So who'd like to take that one?
I can have a go. I think certainly just from a TLM point of view, from where we've been at a business, as a business, it really comes down to time and affording that time back to IFSF. So, you know, giving something back rather than taking everything all the time. And where I just talked about some of the, you know, the new projects, you're not likely to hand those back over because they're still new, and whether us as a vendor or a specific customer we're working with is trying to get a competitive edge, we might be a little bit restrictive on sharing those. But I think, you know, the well-adopted APIs or moving over to APIs from other standards, then, you know, I think it is up to the technical associates, the vendors, to help the wider community, because we benefit, you know, in the long run. The more this is adopted, and a good example is Grant coming in to an industry they've not worked in before. Here's a standard, work to this standard, and the more standards there are, the more people will adopt it, and the easier I think our lives will be. But there are some restrictions. Yeah.
Okay, I'm conscious that we're nearly on the hour, so just in wrap up, we didn't show the slide, but I think Mirko mentioned it. I mean, in the results from the survey, the two big messages that came through were these. You know, what are the critical topics? And it's mobile payment and alternative fuels, and within that you've got EV, H2 and LNG. They were the big messages, and I think that's consistent with what the themes of today. So thank you all for taking the time, both the panel to give your opinions and for the those of you attending and listening and watching for taking on board. And we had some good questions. And there was one question which is around the a 2-slide presentation about the IFSF and its benefits. We'll come back to you on that. There's one final question. What is the panel's view on the migration of current fuel cards from magstripe to chip cards? And how will IFSF address this, given the international schemes are also investing in similar technologies? I'm not sure if we've only got 2 minutes. Does anybody want to have a quick answer to the impact of fuel cards?
Well, I can give a 10 seconds answer. Then obviously this is a much wider topic, but in principle, IFSF has been very active in day one to support the migration from magstripe fuel cards into newer technologies. And I should say that it was a successful example, I may say, compared to others we heard from technical associates, because as far as my experience, all the EMV-based fuel cards I encountered so far, they are very, very aligned to the IFSF guidelines. So that's an example of a standard that was done at the right time and that the industry adopted. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to need to cut off there. I'd now like to hand over to Heather, our chair, who I think, Heather, you want to say a few words about tomorrow?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I'd really like to thank all of you for this session, and Nick and Mirko, you know, thanks for picking up the role on our exec, which I hope all of the technical associates are finding useful and can now see the point of. And thanks very much for this session.